went up in Barry, Mass, and got a
Let's wait for some.
the Italians and Buck. Yeah, they were created by a in England, and these are raised in Barry, so they're hoping that they're a little more climatized. So, is everything, well, everything else comes up from Roebuck.
I got a friend of mine down the line to the balls, and I went in on ordering the soup, came somewhere up here.
Oh, yeah, well, this guy in Hampton that brings a truckload up and a couple of them. There's a fellow over in Rhode Island too. Guy in Rhode Island, I won't say where he gets them from, but they all come out of Georgia, and they're all down there, a guy named Wobex.
Yep.
Been operate for years and years.
All right. Okay. We should get started. No, I said, well, wait until Stu's done, and she said it'd be another 20 minutes. It's her.
Yeah.
All right, anyway, seriously, many of you may be wondering why you're here. Dick and I have been talking for months about this. We had some issues in Woodstock with what we characterize as hoarding. I watched the program on TV, I think last week, it talked about it. It's a historical thing. You know, a lot of people that grew up during the Depression would save things because they might need it. That's a good box. These magazines are, this sort of stuff. Dick's run into a couple of homes in town. And the reason we invited the people that we invited was because you're the ones that are more likely to have to deal with it. And it may get to the point of health and welfare. And if we look at emergency services and we look at others like the building inspector, the constables, the health department, whoever, you may come in contact with people like that. The issue is too, again, from health and welfare, God forbid there's a fire, an emergency, and we have a fatality. Because I know damn right well they're going to come out and say, where was the town? Why wasn't this prevented? So this is why we're trying to be a little bit proactive about this. Anyway, Dave Roberge is the fire marshal in Old Line, and he was on a state task force dealing with the issue of hoarding. And he's come up today to talk to us, to give us some ideas, maybe give us some direction. One of the things, though, that the issue of hoarding has become a mental health issue nationwide, and it comes under issues around obsessive compulsive disorder, it comes under schizophrenia, this sort of thing. As I said to Dick on some of the issues we were talking about, I said, where was the family? In many cases, the family has washed their hands. They just don't want to deal with the weirdness. The kids, mom and dad, it's their problem, this sort of thing. So anyway, just to give us some ideas of where we're heading and maybe how prevalent this issue is. Dave, thank you very much. It's also being recorded, so we'll be able to share this later.
Yeah.
We didn't have any tape, so you're gonna have to
Yeah, you're gonna have to spot me here.
This is the microphone.
From your viewing audience at home, is this okay?
Yeah.
Right. As you first off said, my name is David Burge. I'm a fire marshal for about 23 years. I've had my introduction to hoarding many years ago. I served as a representative of the small town communities within a statewide working group. Back with Governor, who's the last governor? Malloy. Thank you. It's been so long. Governor Malloy created a statewide working task force to study hoarding, and it was a mixture of large cities, small towns, health professionals, mental health professionals, code officials, and we really started to continue to recognize that this is statewide. And every community has it, but nobody really ever went out and started discussing it openly. How many times you drive up and down the streets in your community and you know that one? That's now the yard looks like it's chock-a-block. You can't see through the windows. You drive by at night, you never see a light on. Every community's got, or two, or three, or whatever. Looking at that, how does a municipality respond to this? The fire marshal's office and the fire marshals have, under the state fire marshal's office, guidance is called Directive 10, where if any of the, what we call the 5 deadly sins, any structure, any building, a lot of times fire marshals will say, it's a single family house, nothing to do with it. The Directive 10s identifies that any structure, any building, if it has blocked or obstructed exits or egress, if it has a disabled fire protection or fire alarm system, if it contains an excessive accumulation of combustible materials, if it has explosives or fireworks, or if it's over-occupied. The fire marshal or police officer has the authority to order a vacate of that premise if if an abatement correction cannot be done within 4 hours. Now, this falls normally into play with fire marshal's offices for large events, assemblies, big gatherings, restaurants, bars, nightclubs, where they're over their permitted occupancy. Police officer or fire marshal can walk in and order the place closed and vacated, unless they can thin down the occupancy. How does that address the issues of hoarding? Who's here from EMS? Fire. Have you ever gone into residence for bells and whistle call or faulty activation or a wellness check or a 911 call for a medical alert or any of that, and come across a house that you have difficulty getting from one room to the other?
Well, every other day. I'm kidding.
Do you notify or who do you share that information?
Probably everybody in this room is on this,
And this is a known address,
known address and
district?
you,
One of the ones that
One of the ones.
probably this firm is you.
When you go there, because if you're invited by 911,
Mhm.
they're inviting emergency services to come under exigent circumstances. There's something wrong. That exigency gives you the opportunity while you're in the building and you notice this, to be able to notify a police officer or notify your fire marshal and have them come out at the time of discovery while you're doing treatment transports and evaluations. It gives them the opportunity to determine any of those 5 deadly sins being present. If they do evaluate it and they identify an over excessive accumulation of combustible materials, deactivated or non-functioning fire protection or fire detection system, or blocked or obstructed egress or exit out of that building, he has the authority to be able to say yep or no. If he says yes, I agree with you, one of those 3 things are present, he has the opportunity at that point to be able to go and pull in second evaluator from the state fire marshal's office, which is the Connecticut State Police Fire and Explosion Unit. While he has, and you have exigency on the site, the location, he's able to make some phone calls after witnessing it firsthand and inviting someone down from the fire investigation unit to confirm or deny his findings. That's the case, somebody will come down be deployed from the unit, come down, meet you.
Can you speak up? They're having trouble hearing or sit closer to the microphone. You have to talk a little louder and see if you
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hands up. Okay. So being able to evaluate that, and you have someone standing next to you, and they're either confirming or denying, yes, this condition exists. Fire marshal of the municipality now have the authority to be able to issue what's called an abatement. Two qualified individuals with training, experience, and education are that structure of this building is unsafe for human occupancy due to excessive combustible materials, blocked executive egresses, and functioning small parts. I describe dealing with a hoarding case as one trip around NASCAR, main path. When you start out at the starting gate, you drop the green flag, you are responding to the call. One is first identifying this concern. Into the first term, public notification to code officials is established, and they come out and evaluate. And if they confirm it,
still having trouble. Do you want to hold this?
well, what if I just, I'm 6 feet away from it?
You want to hold the legs pulled down.
You're responsible if I drop it.
Hey, put a chair up there. Set it right up to
Yeah, bring a chair, give me another chair. This kind of reminds me of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds.
Yes. Let's get up on the back. Legs. Let's do this. You got a podium, that would be great.
Oh, I don't like standing at podiums.
Oh, okay, good. I'm glad we didn't bring
Okay, good. Okay, how's that? Yeah. Oh, I got 2 thumbs up. Okay. And what department or agency do you represent?
I'm with Teague. So we Teague, which is the social service agency for your town. So we work with a
Okay.
lot of these folks, and we'd love to have a connection with you with that.
Okay. One of the things I forgot to ask, let's go around the room real quick. I got EMS, I got Teague. Teague? Who are you and why are you here? Who do you represent?
My name is Maureen. I'm from the Northeast District of Connecticut.
Okay.
well, it's chief constable and stuff.
David Lloyd, emergency management director of the
Case one, first selectman.
One who it all falls on.
Yeah, it's always my fault.
Chair of the podcast, board of selectmen.
You're the one who gets, here, we got to do this.
That's
I'm gonna talk a lot.
exactly why-
I'm going to talk a lot to you.
Jeff Walling, chief of Muddy Brook Fire Department.
And Mr. Barron, who's lovely, driving the fire marshal's office.
Director, Colin Chief of Bungay Fire Department.
Oh. 2 hats. Okay.
Adams, office manager, HR, Zoom person.
And she, like Brenda, gets the phone calls when it hits the fan.
Yeah. Okay. So you've got, first day, you've got a great collection in here. You've got pretty much all the key people. Who's your social services is contracted? You have.
We have a close relationship, we'll say that, because they're based in Thompson, but I refer to Teague as our social service agency.
Okay,
Because a lot of things, whether it's youth, food insecurity, whatever, who you gonna call, we'll call Teague.
okay, so you're dealing with the food issues, you're dealing with rent assistance, fuel assistance.
Family matters,
Family matters.
heat, fuel, any of that. And we are often called to help in situations like this if people are willing to work with us.
Okay. I'll give you a quick chance to walk away from this because there's gonna be a lot coming your way after this.
You know, I have to go to another meeting at 5:30, so if I leave, I don't want you to think I'm being rude, but I think these folks know how to find me and they know we're here
Okay.
for them. So, thank you.
All right, so let me, give me until 5, I'll push through this. So in the first turn of NASCAR, you make that first left turn, he gets officially, or the fire marshal's office gets officially notified. At that point in time, during that first turn stretch, what he's doing is he's confirming or denying the presence of the problems. And he's utilizing State Fire Marshal's office, he's utilizing Directive 10, he's utilizing participation and support from the Fire and Explosion Unit. In that second turn, they've confirmed that we have an issue here. At this point in time is when the town has to step up to the plate. The fire marshal's office has to step up to the plate, or the police department has to step up to the plate, either working together or working in conjunction with the first selectman, and determine how you're going to correct this. You've identified a condition that is not sanitary, not healthy. It's a life safety issue. It has to be corrected. How do we go about doing that? The issuance of an abatement order or a vacate order under 29.305 and 29.306 of the state fire marshal's state statutes for fire marshal responsibilities. It gives the fire marshal's office or the fire marshal the authority to be able to order, abate, and vacate. Type up a very nice letter, hand deliver it or serve it. Remember, we're getting into that backstretch now. He walks away. What other support is out there to be able to work with this occupant to come to a good corrective action to allow them to come back into the home? Now I said vacate. Vacate means here's your serve. You have to leave. You have so much stuff in here that it cannot be corrected in 4 hours, or it can't be corrected in a timely fashion that fire marshal feels comfortable with. You have to issue a vacate order and they have to move out. Connecticut state statute has what's called the Relocation Act. You familiar with that one there, Keith? What that does is that requires if you order somebody out of their residence, you have to put them someplace. This goes back to emergency management. Why don't we order evacuations? Because if you're ordering somebody to leave, you have to provide someplace for them to go. Under the Connecticut Relocation Act, which is in the state statutes, and I don't have the number, and I'll send a ton of information to Dick and you can share it with you. Basically, the municipality is obligated to spend $4,000 per person. So if you have a household of 8, that's $48,000 that the town has to have to be able to provide this family of 8 temporary relocation. Because the town, the municipality is issuing the abatement order and the vacate order. This is where municipalities go, let's shove it back under the rug. So you're in that backstretch of the NASCAR track. Somehow miraculously, family members, family community support, social service assistance, VFW, DAV, military organizations, community organizations stepped up, whoever, and helped out this family and got the house or the residents of the building back to somewhat of a life safety condition that's suitable to occupy. That doesn't include, who's here from health department? That doesn't include sanitary, that doesn't include vector, vermin, and what's the third? Vectors, bugs, vermin's, rodents, sewage, unsanitary conditions in the house, garbage, filth. What else was in,
Yeah, but it's,
huh?
are you talking rented?
In the Connecticut Health Code, the Public Health Code, there's a section in there that the health department and the health director can issue an order to abate based upon unsanitary conditions, including filth, garbage, vector, vermin, and there's something else. Off the top of my head, I can't find it, but I'll send you the copy of the link to the statute. Been doing this 23 years, my mind's kind of. The problem with the support of this with the health department is they can also be on board. You're finding the combustible materials, you're finding the blocked or obstructed egress. You can invite in a health department to come in and assist you if you have vermin, vector, filth, raw sewage, unsanitary conditions. They can also issue an abatement order. One of the problems with their order is their order can be appealed. There's an appeal process. Under the Directive 10 and the abatement orders of 29, 305, and 306, there is no abatement order or appeal order because it's been identified by a person, a code official, and it's been confirmed by another code official with the same education, experience, and training. The 29306 gives the fire marshal's office more authority, a bigger club per se, than with the health department. But the health department, if you have unsanitary conditions, filth, raw sewage, et cetera, that's their bailiwick. And so building this relationship and being able to identify what do you consider is vermin, vector, filth, raw sewage, et cetera. Training them to be able to have some identification and clues of what they're looking at. So now we're into that backstretch. Somehow in the third turn, the place got cleaned up, the place got corrected. The occupant is calling the fire marshal's office up and said, hey, look, I did it. It looks pretty good. Can you come down and take a look at it? At this point in time, fire marshal goes down, reevaluates it. You have at least a 3-foot wide walkway throughout one end of the building to the other. Are the windows cleared from obstructions? So if I'm on the second floor and there's a fire, can a rescue be performed by getting access to a rescue window on the second floor in a residence. Do the doors open and close fully? Not what you're accustomed to with a ported house or a clog house. It's, you know, I can open the door this way and you got to turn sideways and put your hand up, sneak through. Once those are done, the abatement and the vacate order has been lifted. And now the occupant, who your first selectman, and I'm impressed and I'm very happy that you understand some of the mental health issues on this. It is a compulsive disorder. It is recognized as a compulsive disorder. It can be treated now under, it's got a medical coding, so social service and mental health services can provide treatment for compulsive hoarding disorder. And it's recognized that after his abatement order is lifted, there's nobody in that fourth turn to keep it from coming right back again. So the importance of this with a municipality dealing with these, fire marshal's office is doing their part. EMS goes there, trips on themselves, climbs over all this stuff, does the medical side. You have to build a team. You have to build a team between the code officials, the health department, your social services personnel, your municipal drivers, and your municipal administration, and your police department or your constabulary force. You have to look at these and work with these as these come in, work together as a team. If not, you're all going to walk away from that third turn, and then in a year or two or whatever, you're going to have something happen. The task force that I serve on, or the working group that I serve on, we're working with Office of Education and Data Management, ODM. They're the ones that get all the inverse reports. They're in the fire and explosion, investigative explosion unit keeps track of their call outs. We started tracking hoarding call or Directive 10 call outs since 2017. January 2017 till February of 2021. Directive 10 call outs totaled 176 requests for service or requests for assistance in those 3.5 years. Out of those 176 call outs for one of the 5 deadly sins, over occupancy, explosives, combustible materials, blocked or obstructed egress, or any structure or building, commercial or residential. How many of those do you think statewide had to do with hoarding? Out of 176 call outs for requests for service? No, thank God. 74. So out of 176 calls spread out between residential and commercial properties, 74 of those were specific to hoarding. And it's throughout the state. There's no municipality really that's unaffected. So it's a growing concern. Couple of fatalities. I had one, I also, besides serving in Old Lyme, I serve as a marshal in Lyme and I serve as a fire investigator in the town of Chester. 2-3 weeks ago, I had a fatality from a fire in a hoarding house. And it does happen. There was a fatality in Cheshire about 6 years ago where it was a direct result of hoarding. And the woman made it out. The one I had in Chester was basically, it was an unattended cooking stove that just spread throughout the house, and she succumbed to smoke inhalation. But she It was 4 feet from the door, but it wasn't totally hoarding related, but the house was chock a block full. You did have a little rack trail to be able to get the. So building that team effect. First selectmen's, or the selectmen's office, being able to describe this problem and work with finance, your finance director and your board of finance to say, we have these conditions in play. We haven't acted on them, or we haven't had to throw any money at it. If I do, what will the Board of Finance support you with? Can you pull $50,000 and earmark it into a hoarding response? Without going to, I see you chuckling.
Well, no, you're hitting us at bad time, it's right in the middle of budget season. I'd rather not talk about it at this time.
Being able to have those conversations. Being able to say, okay, this house is a hoarding issue. We have to take it out from under the rug. We're gonna have to do something. We may have to relocate the occupant. We're gonna cost money. First thing the Board of Finance is gonna say is, oh my God, it's budget season. We don't have any money for that. One of the advantages with the municipality is if you expend costs on this, you do have the right to apply liens on the parcel at 1.8%, 18% annual. So if you do spend $5,000 or $8,000, you have the right to be able to apply the lien back on the property and wait for either the property being sold or having the lien lifted by the occupant or the property owner of record. So you have some reserve or some avenues to be able to turn to. When it comes involved with a renter, you're serving the renter, but you're also serving the property owner. Under Connecticut landlord and tenant statutes, which I am not totally familiar with, but I know that there's some legal responsibilities of the landlord or the property owner at the same time. So even if you're dealing with a tenant situation, the property owner of record still has a piece of skin in the game. Yep. So looking at it from the municipal aspect, you do have some financial right to be able to recoup expenditures and costs that you are putting. When do you want to have that conversation with your Board of Finance or your finance chair? You want to start planting the seed. You want to see what extent can the Board of Finance or your finance director create a floating line on it? Put a dollar in it. But we have an account or a line or a chart of account or a line of account established that in the event of a hoarding type incident, we'll be able to request fundings or identify fundings needed to be able to implement this. You must have it for the fair. You got a line item in there for the Woodstock Fair.
Not so much us, I mean, the building inspector and the fire marshal deal with them.
Yeah.
Fair and that sort of thing.
Well, I was speaking at a municipal level,
Right.
yeah, working down, yeah, the fire marshal's you gotta have a line of account in there, that thing's a time gobbler in itself.
We've got, my office has a small line item, contract services, so
Yep.
the building inspector has a line item. It doesn't equate to relocation, the amount of money that could be drawn on that. And that's where it's key, to go back to the Board of Finance to make sure that we have a line item with some kind of a fund in it, in the event that happens. The biggest thing, like Dave said, and working with the state attorney on housing, if we get to a point where based on, you know, especially the 576, which is the biggest, the statute calls for, it's not a decision whether you have money or not. The decision is
You shall.
you shall, and we will. But I just, the what?
Well, Red Cross, something help?
No, everybody talks Red Cross. Red Cross deals with like fires, floods, relocation, because there is a state relocation act in the statute. It all goes to the town, they won't touch it.
Red Cross will do 48, 72 hours. That's their window of opportunity.
Dave, kidding aside, you know, being a budget season and
Yep.
everything, if we had an emergency tomorrow relative to a hoarding situation, people had to be relocated, removed,
Yep.
we would deal with it. We would deal with it tomorrow.
Okay.
We'd worry about paying for it later, but it would mean going to the Board of Finance
Sure.
to say, we have this situation. I'm not sure that I could convince them the appropriateness of creating a line item to be funded every year.
Okay.
But I know that the money's there. We would go back to them and say, we need X amount of dollars out of contingency to fund this action.
That's an excellent approach.
And that's what we would do, because again, we've had situations not related to this, but what I characterize as emergency situations. We deal with it today, we worry about how to pay for it tomorrow.
Yep.
So,
As a municipality, that's the only way we can really work. But being able to at least have a conversation with them, let them know that coming this year, we're getting more educated on dealing with hoarding and life safety issues within the community. We may have to expend municipal funds to assist in the correction of these acts and explain the whole situation to them. Take the time now. What's it said? You never want to, when the big whirly thing's spinning around, it's not the time to start passing out your business card. Having conversations like this on a sunny day and just start planting the seed.
It's like the intent of this meeting is basically creating. And all the agencies are pretty much here tonight. This is also a part that they know all the statute, they know this happens, and the contingency, that's pretty much the best way to do it. As long as they know. You can see this, so far as our history, we've had two. We've been very lucky with the two, with, not to go into too much detail, but
Understand?
with the deadly sins, and we talk about combustible materials.
Wait a minute, so you gotta go up. Oh, here we go. Here we go.
Talking with the state housing district attorneys, we can, you mentioned that the 3-foot rule versus they call it a goat path. 3 feet, get a stretcher in and out. Smoke detection working, windows for escape. But that doesn't mean by the time you're done with it, you're not gonna see a lot of storage that's still gonna have to be removed. We can go so far, and if we need that.
Yeah.
It's like, I would look at it going, that is way too much. However, what somebody puts in their house is one thing, you know, clean stuff off the stove, you can hit that. So what we can do is like a minimum, it's a bare minimum for life safety. So far, we were able to accomplish that barely, except for us adding smoke detection, which they did. And the other thing we did, we is one of the toughest, is we got a rapport with the person, because that person wasn't letting anybody in.
No.
We use all the time from the state, which they've been offered and offered and offered, but as the state says, they can only work unless the person accepts their help.
Being able to expand on that. The fire marshal's office has the biggest clout under 29, 305, and 306. Being able to build that team approach and having fire marshal's office, municipality in general, and now it's going all back up to T. What tools and resources can you bring to the table and on these projects?
So I have a couple, thank you for asking. I have a couple of things that I can offer. The first thing that I'd like to offer before I forget is that on the 21st of this month, Teague is offering an informational session on hoarding. We've run this program before, and we often get people who have hoarding issues. We more often get relatives of people who have hoarding issues who attend these. We have local fire departments and so forth attend these, and it's put on by Service Master, because we can work with Service Master. They are very experienced in hoarding issues. Finding the money, we would have to work with the town to find the money. The town, Jay knows pretty well how things work. We do have certain funds that will go so far, and then we will work with the town to bring Service Master in, but at the same time to connect folks to other resources, and those would be mental health resources primarily, in order to get any cooperation at all. The other issue that we have is, and Jay knows this, if Jay just calls me up and says, Ann, I've got a hoarding issue out on Senexit Road, could you head out there? I can't do that. I can't cold call. So I have to wait until I'm looped in by the town and the person has agreed to work with us as well. But then we do have resources that we can bring in, and Service Master, we really, it seems like a very strange connection, but because this particular group, Service Master by Mason, is very well experienced in working with folks with hoarding issues, they have a lot of tactics and approaches that work really well in getting folks to cooperate. So that's really our role.
So in the event of a service or servicing or issuing an vacant order, and you have 4 people in the house, what temporary accommodations?
Housing in this area is a huge problem. There is a real housing shortage, affordable housing shortage. Our immediate, we have, if it's winter time and they needed to get into shelter, we have helped the Access Agency open a no-freeze shelter. If there's room in the Access shelter, the regular shelter, we can help them get in. We've put people in motels for short term. We do have some funds for that. Again, we'd work with the town to make sure that our funds weren't completely depleted with that. But we've put people in motels for short term. We have several that we work with.
Being able to have those resources in place, like my municipality, my social service director, she's part-time, but she's reached out to the area motels across the shoreline.
Yep.
Saying,
Yep.
this is what we're looking for. Do you have a rate? And if so, what would be the municipal rate for a single or a double, 1 or 2 persons for 16 days? And we're guesstimating on the days because the statute's driven by dollar amount, not by number of days being displaced.
Yeah, they do have discounted rates that when they work with us.
Also looking at is what other resources do you have in regards and contacts with DHS or DEMIS, with Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services? What
We would
reaches do you have with
United Services, local counselors. We have a counselor that can provide bridge counseling. That's our own terminology, but that's for someone who might not have any resources, but it would provide them with immediate counseling until we could connect them to a longer term solution so that we have the ability to take care of that for 6 to 10 sessions until we can get that person connected.
Do you have any dialogue with Department of Elderly Protective Services?
Yes, yep, we've worked with them as well.
Again, the outreach from your social service director / T's, being able to make sure what's in her toolbox and what, it sounds like you've got some pretty good resources to be able to pull from. It's all going back to taking this drive and building the team approach on it and taking it to the next step of how do you formulate a strike team or a task force for the municipality for hoarding related issues.
Can I just add too that if, Crystal, if you wanted to reach out to me, I can provide you with the information if anyone would like the link to our meeting. It's a full Zoom meeting.
We'll do that, thank you.
What about a lot of children that are involved in this as well? You know, DCF, does that come to play with you guys, or is that separate?
I want to say it's a package deal. When it comes to, for a code official, we're focusing on the fire and life safety aspect of it. Having that partnership and that team effect, social services is, I've got a family of 4. We've got a hoarding condition. 2 kids are minors. And I don't want to say, here you go. And I say that with a smile. But they're the experts to be able to deal with that. So looking at that, 4 times 4 is $15,000. How does social services support the short-term needs of assisting them with temporary relocation? Then you've got the school systems to deal with. Then you have the mental health addiction services or issues to deal with. And also you have to, from a social service side, you're kind of poking along. You're not there with a cattle prod, but you're kind of poking them along. We've got to do something. It's been 10 days and we haven't done anything yet. And you got to come up with a plan.
So if they've met the fire marshal standard, they have the windows exposed, they have the constantly, but there's still clutter or hygiene issues and things like that in the home, and there are minors, does that shift to more of a Department of Health issue, a DCF issue, service issue?
Working from the team approach, it is this team plus you, and then being able to, this team identifies what the accomplishments were, what the outstanding issues are, and what hurdles they're experiencing. And collectively, looking at all your resources, you figure out how to guide them, not cattle prod them, but guide them to get to the finish line.
I will say that it's pretty common for DCF to become involved in these situations. But DCF's goal in any situation is to keep a family intact. They do work really hard now. That's their new approach. But we've often been called in by DCF to kind of keep the family intact, to work with the parent to try to make that happen. We are mandated reporters. If we feel that there is a safety issue, we do have to report that. And just a little bit of an aside, if the housing occurs, the temporary housing is out of the area, it is up to, if DCF is involved, they will transport the children, but if the children are out of the service area for housing, the family would be considered homeless at that time. The town would be responsible for the transportation of those children back to their hometown school.
Another thing to recognize that could be a hurdle down the road. Depending
Right,
upon-
you don't have motels in Woodstock, so they would be either in, sometimes we can do a motel in Sturbridge, sometimes we do one in Dayville. There's another one in Brooklyn, so there would be some transportation involved with that.
We do have the Red Cross list. I got it from them on the housing, the hotels that they already have on file that they work with that can take people on a certain rate. And we have that, so we have that in a toolbox to set that up. So which is, that's a good sign.
I'm catching about every other word, but I think I think that he said that the Red Cross is involved with a list of hotels as well. Yeah.
Correct.
We have that list.
Yep.
We could use that directly if we need to.
Certainly.
So looking at this, we got through the first term, we made it through the second term, we've got it all the way down to the third term. This is where social services and follow-up and dialogue have to continue to be able to continue them going around. Because if not, you're going to be back there in 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years for another catastrophe or a health event, and you're going to find exactly or worse what you found before. Now, we're talking solely right now, we're just talking about what's called possessional hoarding. Possessional hoarding falls, as Jay mentioned earlier, it's a post-depression issue. It is more found in females between the ages of 50 and 80 who serve or work in the educational system, nursing or medical fields, or community outreach. It's more pronounced in those individuals. The reason on the educational side and the nursing side, it's always, those professions historically have always been functioning with very limited or restricted resources. Primary school or elementary school teachers never get enough pencil, pens, crayons, or whatever. If you do your inspections at the elementary school, what do you see in the classrooms for first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth? How much stuff do they have? They've got the perfect box over here to do this art project. And they've got this perfect thing over here they're always collecting. On the medical side, mostly, like I said, 50 to 70 years old. You're looking at Vietnam era and post-Vietnam era nursing and medical providers, where during the Vietnam War, medical supplies were always limited and restricted. So people took those in the medical industry always took the interest of trying to save or reuse or reallocate medical supplies, and it transitions over. So those are psychological, or looking at the target. That's mostly what we're doing. On the other side of the coin, you have what's known as animal hoarding, which is a totally separate concern. That is the crazy cat lady. That is the individual who thinks they can provide for these stray pets. Do you have any of that? Have you ever had any reportings of that up here? Go into a house with 25 cats and dogs, and they think it's perfectly fine. Horses is another one, big one. Sheep, goats, small and medium livestock, pigs. That is a totally separate response. That is more driven by the health department because of unsanitary conditions, vector vermin, and also by the animal control officers by looking at, is the caretaker of that animal providing fresh and clean air? Are they providing clean water? Are they providing suitable food? So when you have 25 dogs pooping all over the house and you have no real containment or support for dog food, animal feed, because it's all over the place, or you're just, one of the tendencies I've seen is they come in with a 50-pound bag or 25-pound bag of purine and just drop it. That's a totally different response. And that's mostly involving health department, doing fire marshal, health department, and animal control. And also you have the resources and assets that you have there as the state animal control officer, Department of Agriculture, and then there's a whole level of secondary resources with CERT teams and animal teams throughout the state.
I would also add that much of it begins with a trauma event.
Yeah.
So you can, if you work your way back into, and they talk about this a lot in the WB Mason, not the WB Mason, the Service Master by Mason, you can work your way back through the hoarded materials. And actually, if you're a good detective, find the date when the trauma happened.
Yeah.
And that's when it will start. It'll start to get out of control. Many of these people will almost nest into that area where everything just, they're finally nested into an area with everything surrounding them. But it will start with a loss, a trauma, an incident that will kind of launch this.
Questions, comments so far?
If first responders go into a house and see it firsthand, then know there's an issue, it's been identified. Neighbor A is concerned that there's an issue over at neighbor B's house. That person reaches out to the fire marshal or to the first selectman with a concern. Does that give them the right to go onto the property? Because at that point,
Neighbor A is concerned about neighbor B. Why is neighbor A concerned? Haven't seen her in a couple of days, the mail's piling up in front of the mailbox.
piled up in front of the windows.
What's visible from, what's the absence or presence from a public way? If the mail, if you haven't seen, if you're in good dialogue with your neighbor, and I haven't seen my neighbor in 3 weeks now, and the mail's building, and I don't see anybody coming or going, that would constitute a request for a wellness check, wouldn't it? The PD side, do a knock and look. That could, you have the authority to be able to do that. EMS has the authority to do that.
You can, our authority goes to, in that type of scenario, the public way could include going to the front door. If the mailman can go to the front door, we could go to the front door and knock on the door. If the person doesn't answer or answers and says you're not coming in, that's as far as we can go. And that juncture, unless there's like the exigent circumstances where there's medical call or someone of fire EMS has been in there and authenticate what's in there, then I can get the state fire. We have ways to get in. We would try to go in first to the door and knock. But if they have a fence that says no trespassing, we can't even do that.
Go for the city. When you, I'm going back to fire and EMS on this. When you first, you're invited in by a 911 call for a medical or fire emergency. You're in there, you're realizing that this is not at home. What do you use to gauge or measure? How bad is bad?
It's usually like safety. Is it a situation where they can either get out if they need to? Is it a situation where like you're seeing, when you say vermin or bugs, on food, the odor,
Yeah.
things along those, but the biggest thing is gonna be like safety. Can we get in the fire or can they get out?
Do you want to put your people into that? Remember what happens when you have, looking at from a fire response, when you have an excessive accumulation of dry combustible materials on throughout the floor plans, what that does is it kind of degrades the structural ability of the house in general. Looking at it, and when you're walking through, you know, how saggy are the ceilings? Is it lightly, or is it, gives you an idea on what's on the second floor? If you're fighting a fire in there, all of a sudden you're putting water in it, you're multiplying the weight load up there by 3. Because now you're gonna get it all wet. It's not gonna burn. Excessively combustible materials no, phrase it. Hoarding houses usually don't go up in a big flash of flame. They sit and they create a lot of smoke, limiting firefighter access, extinguishing operations, and rescue needs. And when you start going in and it's a heavy smoke condition with very little fire, you have to fight your way from room to room to room to be able to find the origin of the fire. By doing that, and you start doing extinguishment, now all of a sudden you may be jeopardizing, you are jeopardizing structural capability of the residence or the structure, building. Being aware of that, being able to catch these and work with people to try to remediate this before a fire emergency happens is a whole lot more advantageous for the community. When you got iPhone, go to your app store and you're going to do a search for clutter image rating. And you're going to download that free clutter image rating app. This will give you a tool. When you're in residence, under exigency, and you're coming across them, you have the ability to on your how about it?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, that's it.
It goes from 1 to 9. And this was developed by a group out of Boston. That is a on-site tool. So by downloading this app, you have it with you all the time.
Did I understand you correctly that all this can be initiated or is initiated through the fire marshal? But when it gets in there, is there a second phase of review that if Richard is initially in and said, uh-oh, we've got a voting situation, and then he in turn calls in a second opinion.
Your report, under 29,305 and 29,306 of the statute, he's required to get a second opinion.
Okay, so essentially, you've got a review of a opinion, initial opinion.
If you do a Google search for Flutter image rating, you should be able to pull up a comparison card and maybe share it with the group. But yes, the statute requires confirmation or denial from the second opinion coming from Connecticut State Police Fire and Explosion Unit.
Okay, so that was, I'm going to deal with what Jen was questioning about. God, I haven't seen my neighbor and my neighbors.
Yep.
Whatever.
This is very interesting. She's trying to get it up for us to see. So it's the National OCD Foundation.
Is that what it's called?
That, this is where she's going right now.
Oh,
It's from the National
Yeah, there you
OCD
go.
Foundation, so that confirms what,
You know,
we're
and
talking about.
these photographs, everybody from Zoom, can you take a picture of that or take a look at that, see the comparisons? One is a little, okay, they didn't pick it up this morning. 2, 3, and 4 are starting to say, we haven't picked it up in a couple of weeks. Notice this, one of the things I look at is what's the condition of the countertops and the stove. The stove being a source of ignition. And an inadvertent activation of the stove would be your primary ignition source, starting something on fire. Anything from 4 above or 5 above, I look at it says more of a, we have an egress or an exit issue here. How evenly or easily can I get out of that room? Usually from the number 5 up, egress will be more and more difficult. And what's the third one? They've got the bedroom, the kitchen, the living room. Notice the windows. 1, 2, and 3, I can access a rescue window. I can walk up to it. 4, I can still get to it, but I'm going to start having some difficulty. 5 and above, you cannot adequately get to that rescue window with egress. The rule of thumb is anything 5 or up. In my municipality, fire and EMS have a lot of this on their phones. They're basically, if you've got one, call me and let me know what the number is. If it's 4 or below, it's a referral to social services. And maybe a knock on the door with fire marshal and social services saying, hey, we've got a problem here we have to deal with. 5, 6, right now you're going into secondary evaluation, confirmations, and order of safety. 7, 8, and 9, most of it is unoccupied. But this is a tool that anybody can use and have in the field. But when you're standing there with the EMS bagger, you're standing there doing the wellness check or knocking on the door, and the door opens up this much. How much of this do you see? As a qualified individual, it's nothing more than you can do a referral. If you can't get in the building, you can call Dick up and say, hey, I did this wellness check. Neighbor concerned about another neighbor. We sent the cops down to knock on the door. They peeked, she came to the door, opened it up 6 inches, but this is kind of what some of the stuff that they saw. Also from the outside of the window, like a number 6, here you're looking out the window. When you're standing at the front door, you're standing at the outside of the home, of the building. Am I seeing this from the window? I have a view through the glass. what am I seeing? Am I seeing an open window like number 3 or 4? Or I'm starting to see very limited window or no window as in 7, 8, 9. Again, using these as clues, taking it and doing referrals. Other comments, questions? What are we at? 5? Where'd you go? She left. She had a meeting. Okay.
Do you have the chat function so people could type in if they had a question?
So it's sufficient to be able to make a call as far as the common environment by being able to see something from the outside.
If do you have a blight office or blight enforcement up here?
We have zoning enforcement.
Do you have a blight ordinance?
Knowing some of the roads that I've driven, I would say no.
Okay. You do not. Okay. So if you had a blight ordinance, and I don't think you want one anyway personally, but if you had a blight ordinance, you could deal with the outside stuff. If you find the outside stuff, more than likely you're gonna find some of this on the inside stuff. You don't have a blight ordinance, it doesn't give you the authority to go on the front door or on the property. It gives you an opportunity to say, okay, if I see this from the outside, I'm gonna make a mental note on this address, because sooner or later, I think something's gonna come in, either 911, EMS call, or whatever, and will get me to the inside. I have no right to talk to them about the messiness in their yard with the blight ordinance. That said, if it's an excessive accumulation of combustible materials, you do have, the fire marshal does have the authority to be able to go in on a modified complaint, that if it's a giant stack of cardboard, it's an accumulation of old furniture just sitting there.
You're talking
Outside.
exterior.
Exterior. That gives the fire marshal the opportunity to come on the property, again, under Directive 10, solely for the outside. But while you're there, if you have the opportunity to witness anything on the inside of the house, it gives you more authority to be able to go back and do that backup or confirmation call to the fire and explosion units. Say, hey, this is what I've got.
When it's on the outside, even as fire marshals, we've got to be cautious and in our reality, it's really gonna be a rather big pile, and it really needs to be in close proximity of the egress or something like that to make our laws stick.
Yes.
Inside, that's where our 5 deadly sins happen.
Yes.
But sometimes it's the way to get in, to go in, just so you know, our outside is limited.
Classic example of an outside excessive combustible loading. Someone who collects pallets. And especially if they're close proximity to a building. I get this every once in a while. Where I have to go down and remind them that they can't collect 72 pallets and put them right next to the building, waiting for disposal. Yeah. Residential side, I've had a yard full of old furniture, probably 20, 30 bureaus. They were an art, they thought they were an art collector, they're more of a junk collector. They would go out and tag sale and, buy furniture for $1 and then bring it home under the premise that they're going to refinish it and sell it for thousands. Well, we've got the hoop tent set up in the backyard, cram packed full of furniture with the weeds growing up all around it. And closer examination is I've got half filled and half used containers of zip strip and all this other, it just accumulated into, you gotta do something. But you do have the authority to chase down where you move forward with them, depending upon what you're finding. Any questions from the outside?
You talked a little bit about structural integrity,
Yes.
with this load, on the hoarder's house. One of the things that comes to my mind is that in these kind of houses, it's normally under-maintained house to start with.
Yes.
And then you're putting, you got a leaky roof. You've got stuff that's, rotten sills, rotten joists. You've got an infestation of termites. You're just looking at a structural collapse.
Yep.
And that's before you put the water on it.
Yep. Also, taking into consideration the status or the condition of the building's utilities. What kind of evaluation or what kind of stress is on the service connection, the overhead service connection coming from the street over the house, down the meter box, through the meter and into the basement? Is that structural deviation, is the meter box of the service connection pole starting to pull away, is it all rotted over there? Down in the basement, is the basement chocker block full, where I don't have 18 inches of clearance to the combustible furnace? I don't have 3 feet of clearance to get to the circuit breakers or the circuit panels. And the stairs restricted and loaded with items and debris where I cannot actively descend from one floor to another. Looking in the basement is the floor joists. Does the overall appearance looking down through the house, does it look like a bow? When you're on the first floor, you get the opportunity to go into the first floor. What's the second floor? What's the second floor sag? Taking a look from the outside of the house, is the house still forming square? Has it shifted? Has it blown out? Has it compressed between the first and the second floors? Standing outside looking at the shingles. Are they there? Are they intact? Looking at the trim around the eaves, is it degraded and rotted? Is it missing? All structural, building code and structural requirements. So in addition to building your team, one of the other things you want to incorporate in is having your building official, your other code official be able. Is the chimney intact? Is it sideways? Is it broken? Is it collapsed in on itself? Is the house so overgrown with shrubbery and vegetation where it's just holding in moisture and starting to degrade the wood component? Having a person with that skill set to be able to come out, to be invited out, to be able to say, yeah, take a look. Determine the structural capability of the house.
Our building inspector was gonna be here, he must have been tied in. He's part of the team because the building code also has a
Unsafe structure.
part in there, they can condemn something quick, so he has a lot of authority also. And he is part of the team that works.
Yep, state building code, section 115, 116.
Yeah.
Or order to correct and unsafe structure.
I talked to our building inspector yesterday about today, and one of the things I explained to him, he asked why he was invited. And I explained why, much like you just said, but also, he, like the assessor and others, they're out in the community, they're looking at the new deck, they're looking at this, but you should also look at the house. What do you see? What would give you reason to believe? That sort of thing. If you see piled materials in front of windows, while you happen to be looking at the new shed, that sort of thing. And that's what I told him, that he's out in the community, he would also be able to observe things that are strange or would bear a second look by perhaps the fire marshal.
If nothing else, it's just a referral.
Yeah.
It's not, if he's going out for a deck inspection, his only obligation or responsibility is to inspect the deck. If he observes something from the public way as he's entering the property to do the deck inspection and finds vermin vector, you know, a bunch of tires with water in them in the middle of July, what does that say? You know? To be able to say, hey, I was on this property and refer it to the health department, refer it to fire marshal's office, doing wellness checks or having neighbors inquire on other neighbors. They reach out to the town like we talked to earlier, having the police department go down, or constables go down and do a wellness check. And while you're there, you're observing what you find. What else? Oh, another new face.
Good info, and I really thank you for coming, Dave. Giving us a start to get our team set up. So we have something in the process. When we run into these things, I know we're gonna get into them more and more.
I'm gonna follow or forward you an email, Dick, of all the statutes and the responsibilities of. And also, I would say, Jay, taking ownership and leadership of building this team. There's a woman at the Newington Fire Department named Megan Mankey. My recommendation would be if you're gonna get this team together and figure out how to move forward, have her come up. She's more than willing to come up, do the exact same thing I'm doing, but to take you into the team approach and the team building responsibilities. She's very good at it.
And that's Newington.
I'll give Dick all her contact information. You can reach out this way. He was going to join me tonight, but he got time constraints and he has 2 meetings. All she does is hoarding, working with hoarding issues out of the city of Newington. And I think you would be she'd be an excellent next step to build the team.
As I said, when we first got together this afternoon, all of us are aware of these situations in Woodstock and other towns too. And I think we're trying to be basically proactive because we want to prevent, an incident down the road. And also, if we're going to be proactive and kind of help assist people, as Richard has done with some of the folks he's worked with, to try to eliminate the problem.
All you can do is move forward.
Yeah.
There's no way to ignore it. It is out there. All right, I think I'm running out of gas here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I have a bunch of my cards?
Have you seen it?